Canada may have just found a way out of the economic pressure from U.S. tariffs. In a surprising move, China is stepping in as a key trade partner, giving Canada a new market to turn to. This comes at a time when the United States is deep in a trade war with even its closest allies, including Europe. Now, with Canada, Mexico, and the EU shifting their trade focus toward China, the big question is, are we watching a new global economic power rise? And what could this mean for America's influence and financial stability? The impact could be massive, and in this video, we're breaking it all down. Before we jump in, don't forget to subscribe for more sharp takes on global economic shifts. The Trump administration hit Chinese goods with a 20% tariff, turning up the heat in an already tense trade war. The goal? Push China into economic concessions. But instead of giving in, China hit back, cutting back on U.S. imports across many industries and strengthening ties with new partners like Canada and the European Union. President Trump didn't expect this. Rather than backing down, China is taking charge in the fight against U.S. tariffs. And for American businesses, this is a major turning point. Farmers, manufacturers, and energy suppliers in the U.S. are hit hard as demand from China, a critical market, shrinks. Prices drop, uncertainty grows, and foreign companies rush in to take the U.S. place. Washington's plan may be backfiring. What many don't realize is how closely American companies are tied to China, not just for cheap production, but for access to millions of customers. If tariffs stay in place, prices rise, jobs are at risk, and some companies may not survive. Take the tech industry, for example. Apple, Intel, and Qualcomm all rely heavily on the Chinese market. Apple makes a big part of its iPhones in China and sells about 16% of its products there. That market is already slipping away. Qualcomm gets nearly half of its total revenue from China, selling chips that power phones around the world. These companies aren't just saving money in China, they're selling to a massive, fast-growing audience. Losing access would be a major blow. It's not just tech. Auto companies are deeply invested too. General Motors actually sells more cars in China than it does in the US, 3.8 million in 1 year alone. Now it's facing steep losses. Ford is in the same boat. If tariffs continue to disrupt these companies, the impact isn't just higher import costs. It's about losing customers and major sales. Even household names like Nike and Starbucks depend on China. Nike earned $7 billion from China in a single year. That's not something any business can easily walk away from. Tariffs may seem like a way to punish China, but they end up hitting American businesses and everyday people just as hard. When the U.S. taxes Chinese goods, companies have two options. Absorb the extra cost, hurting profits. Pass it to consumers, raising prices everywhere. Either way, it's bad news. Prices for steel and aluminum have surged, making construction and cars more expensive. Even simple items like trash cans, coffee makers, and soda in aluminum cans are seeing price hikes. Some argue tariffs will force companies to bring jobs back home, but it's not that simple. Labor costs in the United States are way higher than in China, so making things domestically costs more. Even when U.S. toy factories saw more orders due to tariffs, the higher costs were passed directly to shoppers. And beyond cost, America no longer has the infrastructure for large-scale production. Many industries moved overseas years ago. Rebuilding supply chains would take a long time and massive spending. The clothing industry proves this clearly. Even with tariffs, making clothes in China is still cheaper than restarting U.S. factories. The aerospace sector faces similar problems, relying on special parts made mostly abroad. Companies have spent years building their systems and customer base in China. Moving away from that would be expensive, slow, and for some, not even possible. The result? Higher costs for companies, rising prices for shoppers, and job losses if businesses can't keep up. If the goal is to boost U.S. manufacturing, it will take smarter long-term strategies, not just tariffs that damage the economy. Trump's hardline approach aims to make China bend economically, but the early results show a more complicated picture. China, refusing to fold under pressure, is fighting back quickly, cutting U.S. imports across many industries. Moreover, China is working hard to build new trade relationships with other big economies, especially Canada and the European Union. This smart move is changing the way countries do business with each other, and it's putting the U.S. in a risky spot. The impact on American industries is fast and serious. Let's start with farmers. Many American farmers used to sell a lot of their crops to China. But now, since China is buying less, farmers are stuck with too much food. This makes prices drop, and farmers earn less money. Manufacturers are having the same problem. They can't sell as many machines or tech products to China as before. And it's not just farming or factories. Energy suppliers in the U.S., those who sell oil and gas, are also in trouble. China is cutting back on buying U.S. energy. This creates problems for the whole energy market, with more uncertainty and prices going up and down. As the U.S. loses its place in China's market, other countries are stepping in fast. These foreign companies are building better relationships with China and taking the business that used to go to the U.S. This hurts U.S. businesses and also weakens America's power in global trade. The U.S. wanted to stay on top with tough trade rules, but that plan seems to be pushing the country out instead. Things aren't much better inside the United States either. Big stores like Walmart are stuck. They want to keep prices low for customers, but tariffs make everything more expensive. To deal with this, Walmart asked its Chinese suppliers to lower their prices. China didn't like that, and they called Walmart in for a serious talk. This shows that tensions are rising, not just between countries, but also between companies and governments. On the political side, China is taking action fast. Its diplomats are visiting Europe, trying to win support from leaders who are tired of Trump's aggressive trade tactics. China wants to be seen as a calm and helpful trade partner. If Europe agrees, this could make trade ties between China and Europe much stronger, and that could leave the United States out. This is not good news for the United States or for President Trump. The idea was to hurt China's economy, but the plan has backfired. Instead, China is building stronger friendships and trade deals while the United States loses support. Warning signs are already showing up in the U.S. economy. Right now, inflation, rising prices, is still low, but new tariffs could push prices higher very soon. The U.S. Federal Reserve, which controls interest rates, now has a tough choice: fight inflation or stop the economy from slowing down because of the trade war. But maybe the biggest surprise is how Canada and China are working closer together, especially on energy. The trade war is shaking up global energy markets and creating new paths for trade. In the past, the U.S. was China's top supplier for oil and natural gas. But because of new problems between the two, both countries are now looking for new trade partners. To make things worse, the U.S. put a 10% tariff on oil from Canada. This was meant to pressure Canada into changing trade rules, but Canada didn't back down. Instead, it turned to China. Canada is now building a stronger connection with China by using its Trans Mountain Pipeline. This major project lets Canada send more oil directly to China without going through the U.S. This helps Canada reach Asian buyers and rely less on American oil companies. It's a big change in how energy moves in North America. At the same time, China's need for natural gas is growing, so it's looking at Canada's new LNG terminal in Kitimat, British Columbia. This huge gas plant is expected to start working in 2025 and could send 14 million tons of gas every year. This is a huge step for Canada. It could become a major player in the LNG market. And China wants to be a big customer. All of this shows how much China wants to buy energy from other places. Not just the U.S. Canadian energy companies are already working on big deals to supply gas and oil to Asia. This proves that the shift is real and happening fast. Moreover, China is now focusing on building strong trade partnerships with other major countries, especially Canada and the European Union. This smart move is changing global trade networks and putting the United States in a risky position. The effects on American industries are already being felt, and they're serious. For example, the agriculture industry is suffering. American farmers used to sell a lot of their products to China, but now demand has dropped, leaving them with too much supply. This oversupply is lowering prices and hurting their profits. The same is true for manufacturers who are losing business because China is buying fewer American machines and technologies. Energy companies are also struggling because China is cutting back on buying U.S. oil and gas. This is creating instability and uncertainty in those sectors. While the U.S. pulls back from trading with China, other countries are stepping in to take its place. These foreign competitors are forming stronger trade bonds with China, which weakens U.S. businesses and reduces America's influence in global trade. Ironically, the U.S. strategy to control trade is actually pushing it out of important global markets. Inside the U.S., the situation is no better. Big retailers like Walmart are struggling. Because of tariffs, their costs are rising, and they're trying not to scare away budget-conscious customers. Walmart is even asking Chinese suppliers to lower prices, but this has upset Beijing. As a result, Chinese officials have called Walmart in for discussions, showing how trade tensions are now affecting major companies. On the diplomatic side, China is quickly working to strengthen ties with Europe. Chinese leaders are trying to win over European Union countries that are unhappy with Trump's aggressive trade policies. China wants to show that it is a stable and reliable partner, even if that means reducing America's role in Europe. This situation is bad news for the US and Trump. Their plan to isolate China has backfired. Instead, it has helped China build new alliances. The warning signs in the US economy are clear. Although inflation is still under control, new tariffs might make prices rise in the coming months. Now the Federal Reserve is stuck. Should it focus on fighting inflation or try to stop the economy from slowing down because of trade issues? One of the biggest shifts is the growing relationship between Canada and China in the energy sector. The trade war has shaken up global energy partnerships. The US used to be China's main oil and gas supplier, but not anymore. To make things worse, Washington put a 10% tariff on Canadian oil, trying to force Canada to change trade deals. But Canada didn't give in. Instead, it turned to China and started rebuilding trade routes in a big way. A key part of Canada's plan is the Trans Mountain Pipeline, which now allows Canada to ship more oil to China. This lets Canada avoid selling oil mainly to the US and gives it better access to Asian markets. At the same time, China is increasing its demand for natural gas, and it's now looking to Canada's LNG project in British Columbia. This huge gas terminal is set to start in 2025, and it will ship 14 million tons of LNG every year. This move is a major step forward for Canada as a global energy exporter. To support this plan, Canadian companies are making long-term deals. For example, ARC Resources signed a deal to send 1.5 million tons of LNG every year to ExxonMobil's Asia-Pacific division. This fits with China's goal to get energy from more reliable and diverse sources. In response to U.S. tariffs, Canada is even thinking about cutting or taxing its oil exports to the U.S. If that happens, American oil refineries, which rely on Canadian oil, could face big problems. All of this shows that China is being smart about its energy needs, making new deals, while global politics remain tense. By reducing its dependence on the U.S., China is becoming stronger and pushing the U.S. out of energy markets. This raises important questions about the future of global energy and what it means for economies involved in this shift. Another big issue is the crisis in American farming. The trade war has badly hurt U.S. farmers who grow soybeans, corn, wheat, and pork. China used to buy a lot of these products. In 2016, the U.S. sold 40% of China's soybeans. By 2024, that number dropped to just 18%. With Brazil and Argentina now supplying 74%. Because of this, U.S. farmers have too much product and not enough buyers, causing prices to crash. Many are now facing bankruptcy. This crisis is hurting more than just farmers. Companies that process crops, transport goods, or make farming equipment are also seeing huge losses. Things got so bad that the United States government had to give out $122 billion in aid, including $7.7 billion just for soybean farmers. To make matters worse, European pork sales to China have gone up by 35%, taking even more market share from U.S. farmers. China's retaliatory tariffs have made almost all U.S. farm products more expensive and harder to sell. As a result, U.S. agriculture is struggling, and there are growing worries about how this will hurt the larger economy. China is also changing how it buys important products and technologies, looking beyond the United States. This helps it become more economically stable and gives it an edge in global trade talks. If the United States wants to stay competitive, it needs to change its trade strategy soon. Otherwise, it could be left out of global supply chains and lose power in world trade. The stakes are high. Without urgent changes, the United States might lose its place as a leader in global commerce. This story is far from over. We'll be watching closely and sharing updates as this economic battle continues. Subscribe now so you don't miss the latest on this major global power shift.